Can you even afford to eat here? My sister mocked. Then the waiter walked over with a smile. Welcome back, Ms. Audrey. Your usual table is ready. My dad nearly spit out his wine. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The doors to the Gilded Spoon were heavier than I remembered. Or maybe it was just the weight in my own chest making them feel that way. I pulled, and the scent of the place washed over me, a mix of saffron, reduced wine, and the subtle perfume of fresh herbs that I insisted on having delivered twice a day. Usually, that aroma centered me. It was the smell of my hard work, my dream made real. But tonight, it only twisted the knot in my stomach tighter. I had chosen my outfit with the care of a soldier polishing their armor for battle. A simple black dress, understated and elegant. A single strand of pearls that had belonged to my grandmother, the one person in my family who I think would have actually understood me. My hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. I knew my family would misread it all. They wouldn't see elegance, they'd see a woman trying too hard with limited means. They wouldn't see a classic hairstyle, they'd see someone who couldn't afford a proper blowout. From the entryway, I could already see them. They'd taken the best table, of course. The center one. My mother, Eleanor, looked impeccable in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than my first car. My father, Arthur, was studying the wine list with an exaggerated concentration, a performance he always put on in expensive restaurants. My brother, Miles, and his wife were there, looking like they'd just stepped out of a boardroom. And then there was my sister, Meredith. She was draped in a dress that screamed New Season Gucci, sitting beside a man I didn't recognize but knew instantly. He had that slicked back hair and an expensive watch that caught the light every time he moved. This had to be Spencer, her fiancé. The reason we were all here. My hostess, Celeste, approached me with a warm, professional smile. Good evening, miss. She caught herself just in time, her eyes widening slightly. I gave her the most subtle shake of my head, a silent plea. She understood immediately. Your party is already seated. May I show you to their table? Thank you, Celeste, I murmured, grateful for her discretion. As we walked, my mother spotted me. Her eyes did that thing I remembered from childhood, a swift, head-to-toe scan that calculated the approximate value of my appearance and, as always, found it wanting. Audrey, she said, her voice carrying across the low hum of the restaurant. You finally arrived. We were beginning to wonder. I'm exactly on time, Mother, I replied, my voice steady as I glanced at my watch. 7 o'clock on the dot. My father stood and gave me a stiff, awkward hug. You look healthy, he offered. In our family's language, that was not a compliment. It meant I wasn't stick-thin, the way a woman of our social standing was supposed to be. Meredith barely bothered to look up. She just offered me her cheek to air kiss. Then she gestured to her fiancé. Audrey, this is Spencer. Spencer stood, his handshake a little too firm, a power move I recognized from countless business meetings. Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, he said, by way of introduction. Just made junior partner at Goldman. Not nice to meet you, just a list of credentials. The official language of my family. I took the last empty seat, the silence at the table feeling louder than the chatter around us. I felt like I was 16 again, the odd one out, the family disappointment. And as Meredith looked me up and down one last time, a smirk played on her lips. Audrey, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I'm almost surprised you found the place. Are you sure you can even afford the valet? Her words hung in the air, sharp and cold. And just like that, I was no longer in a fancy restaurant. I was a little girl again, hiding out in the one place in our sprawling Greenwich home where I ever felt like I belonged, the kitchen. Growing up in Montgomery meant something very specific. We weren't just wealthy, we were a legacy. My parents built their entire identity around status. The right address, the right schools, the right friends. Our home was less a home and more a stage for fundraisers and garden parties, where my mother would parade us children around like accessories. I remember her talking to her friends, a glass of Chardonnay in her hand. Meredith is already set on Yale Law, she'd boast. And Miles shows such promise in mathematics. He'll make an excellent investment banker. When the conversation turned to me, her smile would tighten. Oh, Audrey has creative inclinations. She'll find her way. Creative inclinations was code for disappointment. While Meredith was winning debate club trophies and Miles was acing math competitions, I was in the kitchen with our housekeeper, Sophia. Sophia was a warm, wonderful woman from Italy who saw something in me that my own parents couldn't, or wouldn't. She saw passion. I can still feel the flour on my hands. Sophia would be kneading bread dough, her movements strong and sure, and she'd let me work beside her. You have the hands for this, Piccola, she'd say, her voice thick with her accent. The way you taste, the way you smell. You understand food in your soul. She was right. The kitchen was my sanctuary. By 13, I was creating my own recipes. By 16, whenever my parents traveled, I'd host secret dinner parties for my friends. It was the only place I felt authentically myself, where my worth wasn't measured by a report card or a social club membership, but by the flavor of a sauce or the flakiness of a pastry. The inevitable clash came during my junior year of high school. I sat my parents down in my father's study, the room smelling of old books and his expensive whiskey. I told them I wanted to go to culinary school. My father, Arthur, just stared at me over the rim of his glass. The silence stretched on for an eternity before he finally spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. Audrey, the Montgomerys hire chefs, we don't become them. That is servant's work. Servant's work. The words hit me like a slap. All the joy I found in creating, all the passion Sophia had nurtured in me, reduced to something shameful. To them, my dream wasn't a career, it was a stain on the family name. The discussion was over before it even began. There would be no culinary school. There would only be business school, at Dartmouth, where my father and grandfather had gone. It was the Montgomery way. So, I did what was expected of me. I went to Dartmouth. I sat through lectures on microeconomics and corporate finance, my mind a million miles away, dreaming of flavor profiles and plating techniques. On the surface, I was the dutiful daughter, finally on the right track. But underneath, I was living a double life. I found ways to feed my passion in secret. I took food science and nutrition courses, justifying them to my parents as being complementary to business administration. It was a stretch, but they bought it. The real rebellion, though, happened in my tiny off-campus apartment. I started an underground supper club. It began small, just a few friends. But word got out. Soon, I was charging other students for elaborate 5-course meals. The food was ambitious, innovative, everything I couldn't learn in my business classes. And every penny I made from those dinners, I funneled directly into my secret education. On weekends, while my classmates were at football games, I was driving 3 hours to take workshops with local chefs, soaking up every bit of knowledge I could. It was exhausting. I was constantly juggling 2 identities, the respectable business student and the passionate, secret chef. I felt like I was being pulled in 2 different directions, and I knew, deep down, that something had to give. The breaking point came during my first year of grad school. I was 6 months into an MBA program that was making me profoundly, deeply unhappy. It felt like I was suffocating. Then, the universe sent me a sign. A world-renowned French culinary master, Chef Antoine Dubois, a man with 3 Michelin stars and a reputation for being a genius, visited campus for a lecture. There was a reception for him, and I had managed to get on the student catering team for the event. I poured my entire soul into one dish, a complex reduction sauce I had spent weeks perfecting from books and videos. During the reception, I saw him taste it. He stopped, his eyes closed for a moment. Then he looked around the room, searching. He found me in the corner, a nervous student in a cheap catering uniform. He pulled me aside, his accent thick but his eyes deadly serious. "Who taught you to make a reduction like this?" he asked. I taught myself," I stammered. He just stared at me for a moment, and then he handed me his business card. The paper felt heavy, important. "You are wasting your life in a business school," he said, his voice firm. "Come to my kitchen in New York. I will make you great." That night, holding his card in my hand, I knew my double life was over. I couldn't pretend anymore. Chef Du Bois hadn't just complimented my cooking, he had seen me. He had validated the part of myself that my own family had tried so hard to erase. I had a choice to make: the safe, respectable path my family had paved for me, or the terrifying, uncertain path that felt like my own. 2 weeks later, I was standing in my parents' immaculate living room. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I had driven all the way home from school, my heart pounding the entire way. Chef Du Bois's business card felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. My parents and Meredith were all there. They thought it was just a normal weekend visit. I took a deep breath, the scent of my mother's potpourri filling my lungs, and I said the words that would change everything. "I'm dropping out of my MBA program." The silence that followed was deafening. It was heavier and colder than any winter night in New Hampshire. My mother's hand went to her pearls, a gesture she always made when she was socially destabilized. Meredith, who was home from law school for the weekend, actually let out a small, disbelieving laugh. My father was the first to speak. He set his whiskey glass down on the coaster with a deliberate, chilling calm. "This is absolutely unacceptable," he said, his voice low. "We have invested everything in your education," my mother added, her voice hardening. "Your college fund alone." "Everything except respect for what I actually want," I shot back, surprising myself with my own fire. That's when Meredith chimed in, her voice dripping with the condescending tone she'd perfected over a lifetime. Always the dramatic one. "Let's see how you enjoy cooking for minimum wage, little sister. I'm sure you'll come crawling back once you realize what the real world is like." But it was my mother's final words that cut the deepest. She looked at me, her face a mask of disappointment. "If you walk out that door to pursue this hobby," she said, the word hobby laced with contempt, "you do it without a cent of our money. You do it without our support, financial or otherwise. You will be on your own." I looked around the room at my family. My father, rigid with anger. My mother, cold with disapproval. My sister, smug with superiority. And my brother, Miles, just looked embarrassed for me. In that moment, I realized they weren't just rejecting my career choice. They were rejecting me. The real me. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of that room, out of that house, and out of the life they had planned for me. I left that night with nothing but my personal savings, which wasn't much, and a single suitcase. As I drove away, watching the perfectly manicured lawns of Greenwich disappear in my rearview mirror, I was terrified. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. Back at the dinner table at the Gilded Spoon, Meredith's mocking voice brought me back to the present. "Still in that cooking phase, are we?" she sighed dramatically. I took a small sip of my champagne, the bubbles fizzing on my tongue, and I thought about the 5 years she was so dismissively writing off. Those years were harder than anything my family could ever imagine. I moved to New York City with just a few $1,000s to my name. I found a tiny room in a cramped apartment in Queens with 3 roommates. For the first year, I worked 3 jobs. I was a prep cook at a bistro from 5 a.m. to noon, chopping onions until my eyes burned and my hands were raw. Then I'd run to my second job as a line cook at a midtown restaurant, working the dinner rush from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. in a brutally hot kitchen. On weekends, I'd pull shifts at a bakery, getting there at 3 a.m. to start the bread. I slept maybe 4 hours a night. My arms were a roadmap of burns and cuts. There were nights I was so exhausted, I'd fall asleep on a sack of flour in the corner of the stockroom during a 10-minute break. I cried from sheer exhaustion, from loneliness, from the constant pressure. There were times I'd look at my tiny paycheck and wonder how I was going to afford rent, let alone the student loans I had to take out for culinary school. But as hard as it was, something incredible was happening. Under Chef Dubois's mentorship, I was thriving. The intensity of his kitchen, the discipline, the relentless pursuit of perfection, it fed a part of my soul that business school had starved. I became his sous chef within 18 months. He pushed me harder than I'd ever been pushed, and I discovered a strength in myself I never knew I had. The opportunity that changed everything came about 2.5 years ago. I was working a private event at Chef Dubois's restaurant. An investor, a man named James Warren of Warren Capital, tasted a dish I had created. He asked to meet the chef. When he saw me, this young woman in her mid-20s, he was surprised. He told me it was the most innovative thing he'd tasted in years. We talked for hours that night. I told him about my dream, a restaurant that blended classic technique with a modern, artistic sensibility. A place that was elegant but not stuffy, where the food was the star. He saw my vision. He saw my passion. James became my lead investor. We found this very space, which was a failed nightclub at the time. I oversaw everything. I designed the menu, I hired the staff, I even helped pick out the custom plates. We opened the Gilded Spoon 2 years ago to immediate acclaim. 6 months later, we were profitable. And 3 months after that, I used the restaurant's success to secure a business loan and buy out my partners. I've been the sole owner for over a year now. The irony wasn't lost on me, I ended up using that business education after all. I kept all of this from my family. I wanted, for once, to have something that was entirely mine, built on my own terms, not as a way to finally win their approval. The first course arrived, silencing the awkward conversation. It was an amuse-bouche, a single, perfect bite-sized sphere of compressed watermelon with fermented black garlic and a microgreen I sourced from a specialized urban farm. Jessica, one of my most experienced servers, placed one in front of each person. "Compliments of the kitchen," she announced, her eyes meeting mine for just a second, a flash of loyalty in her professional gaze. "Is this all?" Meredith asked, poking at the single bite with her fork, her face a mask of disappointment. "I'm famished." "It's an amuse-bouche, Meredith," I explained calmly. "A small bite to open the palate. The meal hasn't actually started." "I know what an amuse-bouche is, Audrey," she snapped. "I'm not some uncultured slob just because I went to law school instead of playing with food." I watched as they each tasted my creation. My mother took the smallest possible nibble, ever conscious of her figure. My father popped the whole thing in his mouth without a second thought. Miles and his wife at least seemed to savor it. Spencer, the fiancé, made a big show of analyzing the flavors like a wine connoisseur, using terms that made absolutely no culinary sense. "Ah, yes, a very pungent mouthfeel," he declared, nodding sagely. Only Meredith left hers untouched. "I don't do raw garlic," she announced loudly. The black garlic was anything but raw. It had been fermented for 60 days in a temperature-controlled environment, a process I had spent 3 years perfecting. But I just bit my tongue. As our next course arrived, a delicate composition of heirloom tomatoes and house-made ricotta, Spencer swirled his wine. "Decent wine list here," he announced to the table. "Not exceptional, but passable." I had to hide my smile. My sommelier, Jose, who was passing by, shot me a quick glance. I gave him a subtle, reassuring nod. I had poached Jose from a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris. He had turned down offers from all over the world to work with me, to build my wine program. And Spencer, the junior partner at Goldman, had just declared his life's work passable. My mother pushed the artfully arranged tomatoes around her plate. "The portion sizes here are ridiculous," she commented. "All this expense for 3 bites." It's about quality over quantity, mother, I said. It's a tasting menu. My father grumbled in agreement with her. In my day, restaurants gave you a proper meal for your money. This haute cuisine nonsense is just a way to charge more for less food. I sat there, listening to them critique my food, my wine list, my portion sizes, all while being completely oblivious. It was the most surreal, infuriating experience of my life. And the evening was just getting started. As the plates were cleared, the conversation, inevitably, turned back to me. It was my mother who started it, setting down her glass and fixing me with her full attention. So, Audrey dear, she began, her tone falsely sweet. Surely by 29, you're thinking about settling down. All this focus on your career must be lonely. She didn't wait for me to answer. There's that lovely son of Margaret Whitley. He's in hospital administration, I believe. Very stable. I could give her a call. I'm not looking to be set up, mother, I said, my jaw tightening. Well, your options will get more limited with each passing year, she persisted, especially in your situation. My situation, of course, being that I was an unmarried woman in a hobby career with no financial backing from the family. The next course arrived, seared scallops with a brown butter emulsion. Before I could even taste it, Meredith cut in, her tone sharp. She's probably a hostess somewhere, right, Audrey? Putting that business degree to good use seating people and handing out menus. She laughed at her own joke. There's no shame in that, my father interrupted, managing to sound both defensive and condescending at the same time. Everyone has to start somewhere. Though after 5 years, one would have expected some sort of promotion. I've been promoted, I said quietly. Into what? Assistant manager at Applebee's? Meredith laughed again. Even Miles, who usually stayed quiet, chimed in. Not everyone can handle the corporate path, Audrey. We get it. Spencer, meanwhile, had taken a bite of his scallop and was now chewing thoughtfully. Then he motioned for a server. Jessica hurried over. Without looking at her, he said, "This is overcooked. The texture is rubbery." I looked at his plate. The scallop was cooked to a perfect, translucent medium. It was buttery and tender. But I said nothing. I just watched as Jessica, ever the professional, apologized profusely and took his plate back to the kitchen, where I knew they would have to fire a whole new dish for him. It was a relentless barrage. Every comment was a small cut, a reminder of my place in their eyes. They weren't just asking about my life, they were passing judgment on it. They saw my choice not as an act of courage, but as a colossal failure, a foolish rebellion she had yet to grow out of. They couldn't conceive of a world where my path could lead to anything other than struggle and regret. And the worst part was, I was letting them do it. I was sitting there, in my own restaurant, letting them tear down everything I had built. The tension at the table was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Each course that arrived was met with another criticism, another backhanded compliment, another pointed question about my life. They talked about Meredith's wedding plans, the drama over the guest list. Apparently, a recent messy divorce between two prominent families meant they couldn't be seated in the same section. They talked about Miles's latest deal at his firm and Spencer's bonus. Every topic of conversation was a reminder of the world I had left behind, a world of status and success measured in dollars and titles. Then Meredith turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a kind of cruel curiosity. "So, Audrey," she said, her voice dropping, "how exactly are you affording a place like this on a food service salary?" I felt all eyes on me. I could feel the familiar tightness in my chest, the feeling of being cornered. "I manage my finances carefully," I replied, my voice more steady than I felt. "Oh, please," she scoffed, leaning forward. "A dinner here costs more than you probably make in a week. Who are you dating? Is he paying for this?" "I'm not dating anyone," I said evenly. "Then how?" she pressed, her voice getting louder. "Are you in debt?" Are you maxing out your credit cards just to keep up appearances for one night? Because we all rearranged our schedules to be here tonight, at this incredibly exclusive restaurant you suggested. That was a lie. I hadn't suggested it, I had just accepted the invitation. But I didn't correct her. No, she continued, her voice rising with self-righteous anger. I want to know. We've spent this entire evening pretending everything's fine, that your choice to throw away your education and your entire college fund hasn't left you struggling. I think we deserve some honesty. The table fell silent. The question hung in the air, so deliberately insulting that even my parents looked uncomfortable. Meredith, my mother murmured, a weak attempt at intervention. No, I want an answer, Meredith insisted, her eyes locked on mine. She leaned in closer, her voice a venomous whisper that everyone at the table could hear. Tell us, Audrey. Can you even afford to eat here? There it was. The question that summed up everything they thought of me. That after all these years, my worth was still measured by the money they assumed I didn't have. 5 years of backbreaking work, of building a life and a business from nothing, and in their eyes, I was still the charity case, the little sister playing make-believe in the real world. Before I could answer, the final act of the evening began. Marcus, my most senior server, approached the table with the black leather folder containing the check. He placed it discreetly in the center of the table. My father, out of lifelong habit, reached for it. But Spencer intercepted, his movements smooth and practiced. Please, Arthur, allow me, he said, the picture of generosity. My treat, to celebrate the occasion. My father put up a token protest before graciously acquiescing. I watched as Spencer opened the folder. I saw the change immediately. His confident smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of barely concealed shock as he registered the total. I knew exactly what he was looking at. Dinner for 7, with premium wine pairings and that extra $800 bottle of Bordeaux my father had insisted on ordering, ran well over $3,000. Is there a problem? My father asked, noticing the change in his future son-in-law's expression. No, of course not, Spencer recovered quickly, though a little too quickly. Just confirming the calculation. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a black American Express card with a deliberate slowness, making sure we all saw it. But just as he was about to hand it to Marcus, he frowned, looking at the bill again. Wait a minute, he announced, a note of triumph in his voice. There's a mistake here. He signaled sharply for Marcus, who had been waiting patiently nearby. Excuse me, Spencer said, holding up the bill. There's an error on our check. You've only charged us for the beverages, not for the meal. Marcus approached the table, his face a perfect mask of professional calm. He took the folder and looked at the check. Then, he looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. And in that moment, I decided. The charade was over. I gave Marcus the slightest, almost imperceptible, nod. Marcus turned back to Spencer, his expression smooth and unreadable. There's no error, sir, he said, his voice perfectly even. The dinner portion has been taken care of. My father frowned. Taken care of? By whom? The entire table leaned in, their eyes fixed on Marcus. He paused for a beat, letting the anticipation build. Then, he turned his full attention to me. The professional mask dropped, replaced by a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Welcome back, Ms. Audrey, he said, his voice clear and respectful, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Your usual table for your investor meeting is ready whenever you are. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. It was a silence so deep, so profound, you could have heard a pin drop. 6 pairs of eyes swiveled from Marcus to me, their expressions a comical mixture of confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. My mother's hand flew to her pearls. My father's jaw was slack. Spencer looked like he'd been slapped. And Meredith. Meredith just stared, her face completely pale. The smug, superior smirk she had worn all night had vanished, replaced by utter shock. The world had just tilted on its axis, and they were all struggling to find their footing. If you're still listening, could you do me a huge favor and like this video and comment with the number 1 down below? That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and it tells me you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a massive encouragement for me, it really keeps me going. Please, comment with the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer, savoring it. For the first time all night, I was in control. I looked at Marcus, my calm anchor in the middle of this storm. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Please just close out Mr. Harrington's beverage tab. The rest is on the house, as usual." "Very good, Ms. Audrey," he replied, taking the folder from Spencer's now limp hand. "Chef Miranda also wanted to get your opinion on the new spring menu items when you have a moment." "I'll stop by the kitchen before my meeting," I assured him. As Marcus walked away, I finally turned my gaze back to my family. What is happening?" my mother finally managed to stammer. I took a deep breath. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon," I said simply. "My restaurant." "Your restaurant?" my father repeated, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. "You work here?" "No, Father," I clarified, a strange calm settling over me. "I own it. I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor." "That's impossible," Meredith blurted out, finding her voice. "This is one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It was featured in Food and Wine." "Yes, last month," I agreed. "Bon appetit before that. And the New York Times gave us 4 stars last year." Spencer was just staring at me. "But, you said you worked in food service." "You were so vague." "Because I wanted to see," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "I wanted to see how you would all treat me if you thought I was a struggling failure. And tonight, you made that abundantly clear." My mother's face crumpled slightly. "Darling, why wouldn't you tell us? This is an incredible achievement. We would have been so proud." I couldn't help the sharp, bitter laugh that escaped me. "Would you? Would you have been proud? Or are you just proud now that it comes with a 4-star review and a long wait list? You couldn't respect my passion on its own. It only has value to you now that it comes with success you can brag about at your country club." Just then, as if on cue, my chef de cuisine, Miranda, approached the table in her crisp chef's whites. "Sorry to interrupt, Audrey," she said, "but your publisher called about the cookbook cover design, and that journalist from the Times is confirming your interview for next week's feature." "Thank you, Miranda," I nodded. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." As she walked away, I saw the dawning realization on their faces. "Cookbook?" Meredith echoed, her voice barely a whisper. "Coming out this fall," I confirmed. My father, the businessman, was the first to recover, his mind clearly crunching numbers. A restaurant of this caliber, the initial investment must have been millions. 3.4 million, I confirmed. And I've been the sole owner for over a year. The puzzle pieces were finally clicking into place for them, forming a picture they never could have imagined. A picture of a daughter they had written off, who had somehow, without them, built an empire. The rest of the evening felt like a dream. My family, who had spent hours looking down on me, were now looking at me with a bewildering mix of awe and embarrassment. My father, in a transparent attempt to reclaim some credit, said, "You've clearly inherited my business sense." I shut that down immediately. "I built this myself," I said firmly. "Without your connections, your money, or your support." Spencer, ever the opportunist, suddenly perked up. "A cookbook deal, significant revenue. Audrey, have you considered expansion? A restaurant group? I have contacts in hospitality investment who might be very interested." The audacity was breathtaking. He had gone from insulting my food to trying to get a piece of my business in the span of 10 minutes. I'm doing just fine with my current advisors, Spencer, but thank you, I said, my voice dripping with ice. It was my mother who tried to smooth things over, her socialite instincts kicking in. Darling, this is all so impressive. We should celebrate properly. Perhaps we could all have brunch this weekend at the club? I don't think so, I said, rising from my seat. I have a business to run. I looked at them, seeing them clearly for the first time in years. Not as the intimidating figures of my childhood, but as flawed people, trapped in their own narrow definition of success. Audrey, wait, Meredith said, stepping forward. Her usual sharp edge was gone, replaced by something I hadn't heard in years, vulnerability. The things I said tonight, they were unkind. I owe you an apology. They were honest, I replied. That's the silver lining. I finally got to see exactly how you all view me when you think I have nothing. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy. You're right. We should have supported your passion regardless of the outcome. We were wrong. Coming from him, that admission was monumental. Where do we go from here? My mother asked, genuine uncertainty in her voice. I took a deep breath. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But if we're going to have any kind of relationship, it has to be on different terms. I am not the family failure seeking your approval. I am a successful chef and a business owner, and I expect to be treated with the same respect you'd give any other professional. I looked at Bradley. And that means no attempts to network through my restaurant. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Then I looked at my sister. Despite everything, she was still my sister. I'll be at your wedding, I said. And if you'd like, as my gift, I can host the rehearsal dinner here. Her eyes widened. You would do that? You're my sister, I said simply. But this is me offering something I'm proud of. On my own terms. She nodded, a genuine smile finally passing between us. I understand. And I would be honored. The 2 weeks that followed that dinner were a whirlwind. But in the quiet moments, after the last customer had left and the kitchen was clean, I would sit at my favorite table and reflect. Brunch that Sunday had been interesting. I took them to a tiny, hole-in-the-wall place in the East Village run by an old colleague. My parents were visibly uncomfortable with the mismatched chairs and graffiti on the walls, but the food, simple, unpretentious, but masterfully executed, won them over. I never knew simple eggs could taste like this, my father had admitted. It was a small step, but it was a start. The calls started coming. My mother, asking genuine questions about my work. My father, sending me an article about female chefs breaking barriers. Even Miles called, asking if he could bring his kids to see the kitchen sometime. I want them to know, he'd said, that success doesn't have to look the same for everyone. These were fragile beginnings. Not the dramatic, tear-filled reunion of a Hollywood movie. Real healing, I was learning, happens in small gestures, in the gradual rewriting of old patterns. But the most significant change wasn't in them. It was in me. The validation I had once so desperately craved from them now felt strangely unnecessary. I hadn't proven myself to them, I had proven myself to myself. That realization changed everything. I launched a mentorship program for young chefs from disadvantaged backgrounds, offering them the guidance I had fought so hard to find. Watching their confidence grow brought me a satisfaction deeper than any 4-star review. Tonight, sitting here in the quiet of my empty restaurant, my notebook is open to a blank page. I've been struggling to write the introduction to my cookbook. But now, the words finally came. Food has always been my truest language. When words failed, I spoke through flavors. The dishes in this book are more than recipes, they are chapters of a life lived in pursuit of authenticity, not approval. 5 years ago, I stood at a crossroads between expectation and passion. Choosing passion cost me dearly at first, but it ultimately led to the richest feast I could have imagined. Not merely in professional success, but in the discovery that the true feast isn't measured by external validation, but by the courage to honor your own voice, even when it's just a whisper against the shouts of doubt. I set down my pen. I had done it. I had built this life, this success, this happiness, not because I needed to prove my worth to them, but because I couldn't imagine living any other way. In choosing my own path, I had found something more valuable than their approval. I had found myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it with all of you. Have you ever had to choose between what others expected of you and what your own heart was telling you to do? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories. Remember, the most important approval you will ever receive is your own. Thank you for being here. And so, Audrey's story becomes a powerful reminder that true success is not defined by the validation of others, but by the courage to honor our own passions and values. In a world that often measures worth by titles, wealth, or societal expectations, Audrey's journey teaches us that the most fulfilling path is the one where we stay true to ourselves, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Her resilience, determination, and unwavering belief in her vision illuminate the strength we all carry within us when we dare to pursue what truly sets our hearts on fire. This story also challenges us to reflect on how we perceive and support the dreams of those around us. It's a call to celebrate individuality, to nurture the unique talents of others, and to recognize that success comes in many forms, not just the ones we expect. Audrey's family learned this lesson the hard way, but it's never too late to change, to grow, and to rebuild relationships on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between following your heart and meeting others' expectations? Share your thoughts or simply comment good if this story resonated with you. Let's celebrate the courage to be authentic together.